good evening and welcome. You're watching the Policy Times, India's only media which is promoting developmental journalism and policy advocacy. There is only one mission of the Policy Times, that in our lifetime, we want to see India to be a developed, advanced, and peaceful nation of the world, leading the world from the front. To achieve that, people like us today, the experts, two experts that are joining us today, with one even younger, our anchor, our chairman of the show is even younger than the two experts that we have. The objective is to set a roadmap of achieving something good in the sports healthcare sector. Because sports is a pride for any nation, whether winning international sports tournaments or medals or at the domestic level. Sports has always been a pride for any nations to show to the world, but also to feel proud of. So how to achieve that, and healthcare aspects of the sport is also equally important, because in countries, emerging or poor countries like India and a lot of other South Asia and Southeast Asian countries, we do not give much importance to the healthcare aspect of sports. If we give so, I think we can achieve better results from the kind of potential or talent that we have in this country. So to talk on that, we have Dr. Manit Arora. I want to welcome, he's a reputed orthopedics and sports medicine surgeon with international recognition. We also have Dr. Deepal Ranawat, who is a director of Avinav Futuristics Private Limited and sports healthcare expert, and also a member of the ISSF Medical Committee. Welcome, Dr. Ranawat.
Thank you.
The chairman of the show is Dr. P. Shekhar, who is chairman of also Global Smart City Panel, author of around 80 books on different issues, different sectors, connecting the very idea and concept of national growth, national reincarnation. Earlier, we used to talk national growth. Now we are talking about national reincarnation, given the fact that COVID-19 has given a complete new direction, is, I think, the biggest disruption in the human history. And post it, it is all about reincarnation. So we'll talk about that. And he's also an architect of the concept called secure government. So without taking any more time, I want to hand over to Dr. Shekhar to kindly take over the session further.
Thank you, Akram. Technically, this will be the 32nd show event. We had a privilege of Abhinav Bindra through Ranawat about maybe that was the 15th show or something, and extremely well received and well documented and well informed. Now, sports is something where we have to look at sports from multiple angles. People in any place confuse sports with a PT teacher. You know, a PT teacher says right, left, you take hand up and down, and that is sports. And sometimes during your pastime, you just play something. Whereas sports, from these experts, we will come to know that it is far more. It is one is to win medals. Second is to keep yourself healthy. Third is to keep the environment good. Sports is the only field where even when a person is winning or losing, at the end they shake hands. The stall places in politics, they literally go into blows. In any other dimension, when somebody winner or loser is there, they just don't look at each other. Okay, sports is one thing which teaches us to be together. So sports need not be only winning medals. Our panelists will tell you, and because healthcare has to be seen along with the agility of the body. Okay. So what I will do before introducing our panelists, I will run through a small presentation, but I will not run through slide by slide. Because to understand sports healthcare, we have to look at various aspects. Why is it, how can sports and healthcare come in national reincarnation? We generally say national reincarnation means it should be education, it should be, you know, infrastructure, it should be movement, transportation, and so on and so forth. As we know, India is a very vast country. Okay, second largest country in the world. India alone can be, as a country, 206 countries put together, with a population of 1.4 billion. Now you'll find here is a very critical number. We have got 492 million young people between the age of 10 and 30. Okay. That is where the sports plays a huge role. Okay. Now, sports healthcare becomes a core portion of the sports, because sports person, when he is having sports, they need pre-medication while in sports, actual sports, and post-medication. And let us assume somebody is not in sports the way a professional engagement goes. Even then, sports medicine comes out to be of huge care for the health of the person concerned. So again, I will not go into extreme details of various things, just to show that it is not as simple as taking a headache tablet. It is something far more of every aspect of the body, every aspect of our system has to be taken care with sports and without sports. That is where the word healthcare comes, and that is where it gets integrated very intimately with sports and to give a better feel. And these are the market positions in the world. It is almost a $6 billion market. In India, it is few millions only. It is not picked up. There's a huge way to pick up. And why I'm also showing this slide is, since it is low, there's a huge market potential available. Because in India now, we have to look at every field which can give employment to people as one of the fields of expertise. So that is something where our panelists today can play a very great role, where it can give a huge amount of employment, because sports healthcare can include things to do with yoga, things to do with even dancing, things to do with wherever body moves, and that can this, and the healthcare has to fit in. So it can make India fit, it can make the country grow. And secure governance, as I say, is something where through strategic way these particular sectors can grow. I will not go anywhere into detail of secure governance. In today's thing, we would like to hear out our experts. So with that, let me introduce the first of the two panelists. I will introduce Dr. Manit Arora. Now, he has been he is an expert in all the key points of the body which entangle sports. That's what I found from his profile. He, whether that is a knee or this joint or that joint, he's an expert. And he's a world-renowned expert, having himself been in various, all the continents. I don't know which continent he is not there. And with that expertise, he would like to play a very deep role. Now he is in India. We are fortunate that he is back in India. Now, he would play a very big role in seeing, and he has got a presentation. But what I would request is, initially, please talk about yourself for a few minutes, and then talk about what is it that you are all doing. And the presentation can be into the second structure. And let us, mic is yours, Dr. Mani, and then we will call Dr. Anawat.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I'll just share my screen. Okay. So a little bit about me to begin with. So I spent the last 15 years in Australia, and I've worked with international and national athletes. And as Professor Shekhar rightly said, I've now migrated back to India. And thank you to him for having me on this panel today. And I feel privileged to be talking about sports and sports medicine in a country such as India, which is booming. And we're at the right time and the right place for sports in India. And I'll talk about why that is. So now I'm the head of sports medicine at Fortis Mohali. I have over 100 academic publications to my credit. I'm an associate lecturer at the University of New England in Australia, and I'm chair of the ISICSA Research Committee. I'm a board member for the American Orthopedic Foot and Ankle Society, and I'm on the Young Professionals Task Force for ISACOS, which is the International Society of Arthroscopy, Knee Surgery and Sports. So here in India, I've been given a beautiful opportunity to develop something from the ground up. So when I first came here, sports medicine didn't really exist in our region in the north. And tying up with Abhinav Bindra, with Iqbal, we've been able to establish a sports medicine clinic here, which caters to athletes as well as the general population. And we'll talk about that a bit more towards the end of this talk. So I'll just begin and say that in 2000, this is what the Indian sports scene looked like. We were all just fascinated with cricket. We knew about the Fab Four, we knew about cricket, and more than that, we didn't know about too much else. Now, see the contrast with 2020, how the game has changed. There's so many more sports which are available on the TV. There's so many sports that are available for audiences to go into and watch them. And viewership data is exponential over these years. So what's changed? So audience interests have diversified. The driver really was businesses in this. So private entities pumping in cash into big leagues, big celebrities, big endorsements combined with an Indian TV audience which was hungry for entertainment. There's been next level fan engagement. So if you watch the IPL and if you watch some of the soccer and football leagues, you'll see that there's a lot of online apps now. There's websites which are dedicated for the teams. There's social media armies that exist for various sports and various teams, and they have huge backings. In fact, there's theme days that have been started for various sports. And so what we've done in the last 20 years is taken the American model of sports and blasted it onto Indian consumers. And in that way, we've diversified interests across sports. We're not only focused on cricket now, we're focused on many other sports. There's big potential, there's big celebrities, big endorsement, and big money in sports. So the numbers are huge. So the IPL in 2019 raked in 1 billion plus impressions. It had $2.55 billion in broadcasting deals. The brand worth alone in 2019 was worth over $6.3 billion. And that's huge. So that's comparable data to the NFL, the NBA, even though that they're higher. But if something's coming out of India and it's Indian made, and it's made in India, and which the IPO truly is, and it's able to generate revenues of 6.3 billion as a brand worth, that's amazing. 18 million people alone watched the IPL on a single app, Hotstar. The final of the IPL was watched by 18 million people only on one app. That doesn't even include the TV audiences. The Pro Kabaddi League has 1.2 billion impressions last year. The Badminton League had 200 million impressions. The ISL had 34 million viewers on its opening match between Atletico Calcutta and Kerala. Even Pro Volleyball, which has always been a sort of secondary sport in India, got 14.3 million viewers in its opening week, which is astounding. We're hungrier for sports than we were ever before. And the growth in sports has led to a growth in sports personnel. There's been an explosion of sports personnel across teams in India, and it's mostly in the tier one and tier two cities at this stage. So sports physios have seen an exponential rise, along with training courses in sports physiotherapy at various institutes. Sports medicine, nutrition, psychologists, all of these ancillary parts of sports have blossomed and bloomed over the last 20 years. Sports institutes have come up in the private sector. Now there's dedicated staff, there's huge infrastructure, huge development that all private sectors are doing and the government sector is doing to help establish sports and sports medicine in India. There's athlete first programs which are focused on the Olympics, which are focused on taking athletes at a nascent stage and taking them to an Olympic gold medal. And it's a good time overall to be a sports person and a sports personnel in India. And there's a big need for sports medicine. So this is the Federation of Indian Commerce data. So for every 1,100 people that are playing sports in India, 25 sports medicine experts are needed. You need 22 sports nutritionists, 50 trainers, 11 sports psychologists, and 106 sports physios and strength trainers. So if you look at the, as Dr. Shekhar was saying before, there's 400 million Indians between the age of 10 and 30. For if we look at 1,000 of them and times that number, we're looking at somewhere around about 25,000 sports professionals and sports medicine experts are needed in India over the next 10 to 15 years. And that's incredible. So, and this is how the explosion is happening. So there's 783 registered institutes, and each institute, there's 40,000 physical education teachers, and the numbers are growing. And the beauty of India is that we have such a large population. And as Sir rightly was saying, there's a huge number of sports personnel. And so it needs a huge number of sports medicine experts as well. We got to look after our athletes. The athletes are going to continue to grow as our interests are diversified. We're getting more and more people not involved in cricket, involved in football, involved in volleyball, involved in badminton. And all these sports with all these athletes need an army of sports medicine people to help them. So the projected human resource requirements for the next 10 years by 2022, if you look at number 4 here, sports medicine needs 4.3 lakh people to look after the current athletes. That's incredible. And where are we at right now? Just 11%. So we've only really started to scratch the surface. There's 90% to go. So does demand equal supply? So we know there's a huge demand. We need 4.5 lakh sports medicine experts by 2022. Are we there yet? Oh no, we're only at 10%. So despite the huge projected and current demand for sports medicine, there's a glaring lack of well-trained, educated and experienced sports medicine doctors in India at the moment. And that stems from many reasons. There's a lack of government investment into sports medicine education. There's a lack of jobs for sports medicine doctors once they come out of their programs. And there's a lack of integration of sports medicine across sporting disciplines. And I'll tell you why. So Indian sports is a really physio down model. So physios, and we've been blessed to have some of the best sports physios available. So foreign and local, and they're in charge of team health. They're basically what drives team health, team sports. They're often overburdened and they're burnt out. They're involved with multitasking. They have to look after injury management, injury prevention, nutrition, strength and conditioning, thousands of things on a team. And despite that, physiotherapy too. So they got to do their core job in addition to hundreds of other jobs. And that puts a lot of burden and a lot of pressure on them. So if you look at the Western sports model, how is it different? It's a physio-centric model, not a physio-down model. So you've got physios that are central to the process. They play a pivotal role, but you've also got other support staff around them to help take some of the burden off. You've got a nutritionist who's going to look after the athlete's nutrition. You've got a psychologist who's going to look after the psychology of the team. You've got an athletic trainer and S&C guys to look after conditioning of players. You've got sports medicine doctors. So these are really important people to have in the teams. And I'll tell you why. So the role of sports medicine doctor in teams, they're usually extremely well qualified sports medicine or sports orthopedics that have team experience. That means they've either gone through the general medicine program and they've had an interest in sports, or they've gone through orthopedic surgery training and they've got an interest in sports. So what happens is after that, they usually end up working with some teams, getting some team experience under their belt, and then becoming a true sports medicine doctor. They travel with the team as a full-time staff. They take care of the day-to-day medical issues of the team. So if an athlete's got a stomach bug, they have to look after it. If an athlete's got a headache before the match, they have to look after it. If the athlete falls sick and needs to go to the hospital, they have to look after it. So it's the nitty-gritty day-to-day medical issues, and they take that load off the physios. They're central to both injury management and injury prevention. So we've got to prevent people getting injuries. If they do get an injury, how do we manage them? How do we treat them? And that's where sports medicine doctors play a big role. The other big role they play is developing injury surveillance protocols. So that means that what happens in India right now is that a season starts, season finishes. All of the athletes go to the home. Now they, and I'll give you an example. So we had an ISL player that came to me about 3, 4 weeks ago. So he's in the off season. He went home. He was playing he was playing football with some of his friends. He twisted his knee and got an ACL injury. Now there's no program in place whereby this guy will contact his physio, contact his team, let them know that he's had an injury so they can monitor it. And that's where sports medicine doctors are really important. So they are the people who lay down these injury surveillance protocols, or we are the people that lay down the injury surveillance protocols so that we can keep a track of our players and what's happening to them, not just from an injury perspective, but are they putting on weight during the off season? Are they well conditioned during the off season? Do they have some program or plan that they can take home with them to make sure that they don't come back fat and injury prone heading into the next season? Because that's how injuries happen. You've got a deconditioned athlete that comes into the preseason, the load suddenly increases, and now they're under so much pressure to perform, to get onto the starting spot onto the team, that they end up with an injury, and that derails their whole season. So that's where injury surveillance protocols are really important. So as sports medicine doctors, we get inputs from various sources. We get inputs from the nutritionist, from the psychologist, and we have to work closely with the physios to look after the athlete. We got to keep them away from injuries during the season and the preseason, monitor them in the off season, and God forbid an injury happens, we have to be prepared to deal with it on the field, as well as taking them to the hospital and managing them in the hospital as well. So what we do is we set up a network with various hospitals wherever we travel. We liaise with them and find out who's a good gastroenterologist, who's a good hepatologist, who's a good general medicine doctor. So someone that we can reach out to when we need to. And there's so many other tasks that sports medicine doctors have to do. So they've got a lot on their plate. And yet in India right now, all of these tasks are carried out by sports physiotherapists. So you can imagine they have to do their own things, their own physiotherapy, look after everything else, and also consume all the work that the sports medicine doc really needs to do. So no wonder they're burnt out. Now, in COVID 19, the role of the sports medicine doctor has become even more important. Why? Because we got to know what's happening with COVID. We have to be up to date with what the current guidelines are. How are we going to isolate players? We have to have best practice guidelines in place for COVID. So I'll give you an example. The Indian hockey team camp just started. So 6 of their players tested positive for COVID in the initial camp. Now, what's the guidelines laid down for how are we going to manage these people? Has there been intermingling of these 6 players with other players before they got there? Or did the intermingling happen once they got there? Now that they're positive, what are we going to do with them? So these are all things that the sports medicine doctor with the Indian hockey team looks at. They look at how am I going to isolate these 6 players that are positive? How am I going to make sure that I can treat them and also protect the other players at the same time? And once these players are fit to resume and come back into my squad, how am I going to look after them? How am I going to monitor them? Because what we're seeing now is that all the data that's coming out is there is a big problem with post-COVID athletes. So they're having some issues with lung fibrosis. There's some early papers that have come out showing that if you've got COVID and you're an athlete, you've got some heart damage that gets built into the system. So we have to monitor them now, make sure that are they going to be able to perform at their peak lung capacity? Are they going to be able to perform at their peak heart capacity? The last thing we want is for an athlete to die on the field. So right now, during COVID times, the role of a sports medicine doctor is really important. And they're really important for all these bubbles that we're creating. So all of the sports nows are working on a bubble concept. So we're isolating people. We're only allowing players, staff, and accessory personnel to travel with the teams. They're all quarantined. There's checks prior to them entering and exiting. Once inside, we do maintenance checks for all of the players. So, and during these times, the sports medicine doc has to look after all the COVID practice and guidelines. We have to make sure that their food is well sanitized, they have hygiene within their room, the interactions between them and with other people are minimized or none. And the really important thing that we need to do, which we're sort of neglecting right now, is we need to build an exit strategy. So once they're in the bubble and we're keeping a close eye on them, we know how to manage them. We know how to keep them safe. We know how to keep them protected. And we know what to do if someone comes positive, like the Delhi Capitals coach who came positive. Now he's being managed because now we know what to do with these people that come positive and how to isolate them and protect them from the rest of the team and when the testing is going to happen. But one thing we need is to build an exit monitoring. So once the players leave, are they taking a virus back with them to their home city? And if they are going back to their home cities, in their home, does a virus already exist? So that's something that we need to keep a track of. So how can we bring about the change? So we know that the demand doesn't equal the supply. There's a big role for sports and sports medicine in India. What are the big 3 areas that we need to look at to really get sports medicine into the limelight? So 1 is education, 2 is opportunities, and 3 is investment. So sports medicine is only offered by 5 colleges in India at the moment. The total number of sports medicine doctors that graduate, 20 to 30 per year. There's a handful of diploma programs. There's a few fellowship programs, including the ones we run, but they're more aimed at orthopedic personnel rather than true sports medicine doctors. There's educational societies. So there's an Indian Society for Sports Medicine they've developed, but they're not yet robust enough to cause any significant policy change. So the good development is that sports medicine and there's in NIS Patiala, the government has sanctioned a sports medicine and science institute, and that's really going to become a mecca for sports medicine in the north. So what's common in this photo? These are the only 5 colleges offering sports medicine in India. 20 to 30 students coming out every year. Now, where are these students going? So they graduate from these programs, and again, 20 to 30 is too small. Remember, we need 4.5 lakh. And 20 to 30, we're never going to get there at that rate. We need more educational institutes to come up, and the number of seats needs to increase. So once they come out of these colleges, where do they go? Opportunities. So once they graduated, the opportunities are really non-existent at the moment. Where are the jobs? They're not there. They're not in the government sector. They're not in the private sector, but the change is coming. So if you look at, the government has sanctioned sports medicine doctors for almost all of the now government teams. Sports medicine doctors are being sanctioned for sports medicine institutes. The ISL, the Indian Super League, this year's mandated team doctors, but they do not have to have a sports medicine qualification. So that's the rider there. So we've got to get them to change that. The IPL, for the first time this year, made it mandatory that you must have a team doctor with the team. So in the previous years, a team doctor used to be on call. This year, they have to be there with the team in Dubai. So an investment, so government investment, we have to create more seats for sports medicine in government colleges. There needs to be more jobs and opportunities in the government sector, and we need to mandate sporting teams to have sports medicine doctors compulsorily rather than voluntarily. The private sector needs to step in as well. They need to adhere to the guidelines that are laid down by the government. They need to have proper funding and creation of jobs with teams. Adequate infrastructure and resources are needed. And our aim is to push away from that physio down model to that team model, where we have good number of adequately well-trained staff to look after all the different issues within the team. And the private sector is doing a really good job of this along with the government. They're setting up institutes such as the Inspire Institute of Sports in Vijayawada, the Abhinav Bindra Targeting Performance Center in Odisha, which is run as a public-private partnership. And so the sports ecosystem needs to use all of these arms. They need to use the media to push across the message. There needs to be infrastructure, there needs to be retailing, and there needs to be technological advances. So what can the government do to help? Invest more in education, create opportunities in the government sector. They need to drive policy into private sector. And they need to set up government infrastructure, sports institutes where they house athletes and sports personnel with a focus on sports medicine and sports sciences, as the government is doing, and they've started doing a really good job of this. So what's the future for the private sector? There needs to be more institutes coming up like ABTP, like IIS, where they become a hub for educating personnel. They create job opportunities for sports medicine people that are coming out of these colleges. They integrate sports medicine doctors into the workforce and into the development of athletes. Track programs such as Olympic Gold Quest need to diversify away from using orthopedic surgeons as points of call and really invest in having true sports medicine doctors to look after their athletes. I mean, that's what sports medicine doctors are there for in the first place. Teams such as the IPL, ISL, they need to mandate having a sports medicine doctor with each team, each season, not just this season because COVID's there, but here on out. And they'll understand and realize that how important sports medicine doctors are, and they'll build it into them. And there's a simple business model here. So you have a low investment and you have a high reward. So you're investing a low salary to get a sports medicine doctor in your team, looking after your athletes. And you know what the reward is? Your athletes aren't going to have injuries. There's going to be lower injuries. They're going to play the season. They're going to perform at a high level, and they may even win you the championship. So how are we contributing in Chandigarh? So Fortis Mohali, in conjunction with Abhinav Bindra, we've established the first sports medicine clinic in North India. So we've got excellent sports medicine, excellent sports physiotherapy, and we've got successful athletes. Now, Dikpal will talk about this more. So there's access to world-class rehab, medicine, and biomechanics at these facilities, and top athletes are using them. And we haven't just kept it just for the athletes. They're open to the general population. They're open to amateur athletes. They're open to developing athletes. They're open to anyone that wants to come in and get better and perform better. So do get in touch with us. And we've also made them an educational institute. So we've got an active fellowship program whereby sports doctors come in, they learn new skills, they upskill them in Skill India, and they're able to take these things back to their teams, to their cities, and then educate others down that line. So in summary, India needs a huge amount of sports medicine doctors. We're way behind at the moment and we need to catch up fast. The three mantras here are education, opportunities, and investment. And the government and private sector need to combine forces and play a really important role for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manit. It's been an excellent presentation. I think it has been good in terms of the facts, figures, and the conclusion. It has been quite momentous. Now we have our Dr. Dikpal. Dikpal is again another international person. He has been in Spain and he has done wonderful work. And when we look at all this thing, when we say what would a sportsman like to have, sportsman would like to get Olympic medal. And Dikpal is associated with India's only gold medalist in Olympics, Abhinav Binda. And his own company's name itself is Abhinav Futuristic. So he's talking of futuristic for India, for more gold medal and more things to come. So I would request him to give, he's also giving a presentation, I believe, and give a full overview from what Manit has left off, because he has left off for you to start. But again, first 2 minutes on you, and then another 5 minutes on COVID and post-COVID. And then what do we look for from national growth? Of course, you all can talk of global growth. We need not limit ourselves to national growth. Dr. Dikpal.
Thank you, Dr. Shekhar, and good evening, everyone. And it was a great insight, Dr. Manit, regarding the real need in the sporting ecosystem when it comes to expertise and education and the opportunities which lies right now in the Indian ecosystem. And guys, just to give you a brief idea about myself, I'm Dr. Dikpal Ranawat. I'm the director of Abhinav Bindra Targeting Performance Centers. I was also the team medico working with Mr. Abhinav Bindra during his Rio Olympic training cycle. I worked with a few of the top doctors in Germany, and after the Olympic Games, Abhinav Bindra has been to the best of best centers, and he has been an athlete for 22 years. He thought that in India there is a big gap when it comes to having an objective approach to training and also education. And keeping that in mind, the ABTP centers were born, and the first center was established in October 2016 in Mohali, followed by a second center in Fortis Escorts in Delhi. Then we have a center in Padukone Dravid Center for Sports Excellence in Bangalore. We have a facility in Pune, and we have a facility, a state-of-art facility, first of its kind, a holistic sports medicine and rehab center in Odisha, in Bhubaneswar, which is the new sports capital. And we work very closely with the state government, and also it's a PPP model. I'll emphasize a little bit more on that. My presentation today is to give you an insight what goes in, building an athlete. So, we think that sport is just about playing, and there are certain skills involved, but it's a science. Every sport is scientific in nature, and that's where there are a lot of people who are working silently in building an athlete over the time period, and I'm going to emphasize on that. So you see, when we talk about any model of development in sport, it has to be athlete-centric, coach-led, and system-driven. So that's where every policy or any infrastructure which needs to be created, or any structure which needs to be created, it has to be athlete-centric model. And it should not be an elite model only. We have to look at a grassroots model, we have to look at a youth model and an elite model. And it should revolve around, the human side of the athlete first. We need to just don't look at the athlete as a person who we push to make sure that they achieve excellence. So that would be only one or two or handful of athletes. What about the other athletes? There are so many athletes who pursue sport as a career, but there are so many different psychological barriers or or barriers of opportunities which are there. So there should be a holistic approach which should be athlete centric overall. And you see, when we talk about any sport, you take any sport, if it's badminton, shooting, swimming, cricket, hockey, there are three important components which needs to come in sync, which is, first of all, the physical component, physical training, mental training, and the technical component, which the coach generally looks after. So there has to be a holistic training approach, which will help an athlete to have better receptive approach to their training. Quality of movement is very, very important, which will help avoid injuries. And also the athlete will have to take better control over these parameters to excel. If you look at the comparative study between the UK and the Indian structure and the money spent in the medals won, if you see UK has spent almost 50 crores for each athlete for each medal, and vice versa. If you look at India, we have spent around 38 crores overall for our Olympic athletes going to Rio. And if you look at USOC, it was from the 2018 report of the USOC, where you see they have mentioned that already they have invested around $6.7 million of services and sports science, where sports science plays a very important role. And US has been the most celebrated country when it comes to their performance at the Olympic Games, and they won more than 2,500 medals till date in the Olympic Games. And same way, if you look here, India has only produced one individual Olympic gold medalist, which is Abhinav Bindra. And for him, sports science have been an important element which he has incorporated, a scientific approach to training. And he has been to the best of best centers across the globe. He has always looked out, even that 1% of edge which can be worked on to become a better athlete. And keeping that in mind, all our centers work on this concept of STEAM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, analytics, and medicine. That is what we precisely implement when it comes to any form of service we provide to our athletes, and also the athlete-centric approach which we implement when it comes to the athletes' assessment, training, prehab, and rehab. So if you look at sports performance or rehab, how things have changed or how things have been in the last 20 years. So you see, still in India, in a lot of facilities, we have very extreme advanced sports medicine diagnostic facilities, sports science facilities, where the athlete goes, they do all different form of tests. But then at the end, they go to the basic gym to work on it. So there's a big difference. They're not able to use that objective data to implement into their day-to-day training. So there's a big gap. And that is what we are trying to change in India through our ABTP centers. And how it's different is, you see, in the old era, when the athlete goes into the sports science facility, they have an area for any form of acute injury or pain management. Then they go to the gym, in that they have basic weights, treadmill, and they have a mirror which gives them biofeedback. So what are the areas which are lacking? First of all, the athlete has no biofeedback, or the athlete has no starting point, because there's no data in place. So the athlete is not motivated. The athlete has no idea in which direction he or she is moving. Vice versa, if you see with the new approach, where in ABTP centers we have things which have been adopted as per European standards, which is there already established in all the top soccer clubs like AC Milan, AC Roma, Real Madrid. And we have got that in India, because we believe that apart from assessment, the same component needs to be applied into their day-to-day training as well. And that's where the system, what we have created, it's a very holistic system which looks at different variables of training. We have created different labs like postural lab, functional lab, gait lab, running lab, physiology lab, where different elements and scientific approach to athletes' needs have been catered. And plus, it's just not diagnostic, it's therapeutic as well, where once the diagnosis has been done, we give them also corrective measures, or measures to improve those areas, which can help them improve their overall performance. So this is the new era of sports performance and rehab, which is at the ABTP centers. And the same technology, as I've mentioned, has been used by the best soccer clubs and also the top Olympic centers like the Austrian Olympic Center, the Italian Olympic Committee. They generally have centers like these, which they use. The FIFA medical centers around the globe, they have a facility like ours. And that is what we're trying to incorporate, because once we educate or empower our youth, and give them facilities which is available which was only available in the West, and now it's available for them. It will help change the dynamics of their performance as well, also empower them. So I'm going to talk about the ABTP sports performance model. So in this model, you see any athlete who comes to our facility, first of all, there are 4 different verticals which we look at. One is sports-specific assessment. So it can be a weightlifter, it can be a hockey player. We understand the biomechanical needs of that sport. For example, the weightlifter needs good amount of static stability, he needs explosivity, he needs muscle balance. So we check those components. Vis-a-vis for a hockey player, the hockey player needs speed, he needs agility, he needs body control, he needs a good amount of core stability, hand-eye coordination. So we work on those components. After that, we have a consultation with the coach, with the athlete, and with our team together to precisely chalk out an athlete-centric approach, rather than just coach what the coach believes or what the physiotherapist believes. We don't implement it. That is more subjective. We have an objective approach which is scientific in nature. Based on that, the program has been created, and after every 3 months, we have a reassessment. Because if we have a starting point, we should have an end point as well, to see if the program was efficient or not. And also all these stakeholders for the first time are accountable. Before, if there was no data in place, what used to happen was, the coach used to implement a program for 10 athletes, one program, or, for 5 athletes, one program, and we don't know in which direction we are moving. And everything is based on what the athlete feels. So there was no clarity in structure, but now things are very professional, scientific, and objective in nature. And also we provide solutions for injury management. We feel that in India right now, we always say that, okay, once an athlete gets an injury, we want to provide a good rehab, sports medicine, solution. But in the West, they believe that your ecosystem of sports medicine, doctor, physical therapist, athletic trainer, coach, nutritionist, psychologist should be so good, so scientific that the athlete should be injury free throughout the season. And we can't we can't say that athlete won't get an injury, but at least we have to look out in a way. The program should be so strong or so scientific where we are able to manage any injury or preempt an injury for an athlete and minimize it as much as possible. So what are the verticals we serve, which is very, very important for an athlete? First is a biomechanical assessment, scientific assessment to the as per the athlete's needs. Second is high performance training, help athlete design goals for them, for their particular sport, and help them achieve them. Third is advanced rehab solution, where if someone gets an injury, we make sure that they get out of their injury and back on the field of play as soon as possible. Recovery plays a very important role, the load management component for the athlete, and also working closely with the ecosystem as well. It helps to define the right load for the athlete and also make a realistic recovery plan for the athlete. And prehab is the need of the hour, where we have to incorporate a prehab program for the athlete. So when I talk about sports performance assessment, we generally have systems in place where we can check close to 30 different parameters for the athlete. And you can see on the right side, there are different tests which needs to be conducted for the athlete to understand the body conditioning of the athlete, and also their physical preparedness, and also their technical experts, how it correlates to their physical, mental, and performance scenario. And so that is what we do for the athletes. Followed by, we have various labs which we have created. As I've mentioned, we have the biomechanical lab and the postural lab. We have the gait and physiology lab. We have the functional lab, where we check all the functional components, and rehab and recovery lab. And this is the need of the hour. It should be implemented in every state, every district, to work on different variables like injury prevention, talent identification, and scientific training. So in the postural lab, we have different scientific approach, which are again data driven, where we precisely check athletes' joint stability. So in the first picture, you see the athlete is standing on a sensorized platform. It is very essential and an important test and a training tool for sports which are static in nature, like shooting, archery, and also for weightlifting, we can work on the static component. Then the second device, which is the postural bench, it precisely gives you information about the postural chain of muscles. Generally in hockey, the athlete has to flex a lot, and that is the position they have to adopt throughout the game. So there's a lot of unnatural stress on their back, and a lot of injuries happen in the back over the time period for athletes in different sports as well, like racket sports, because those are high impact sports. Also team sports like football and also hockey. So that's where on these devices we can precisely quantify now with numbers in place that which muscle is impacted, which zone is impacted, and what is the impact of those muscle imbalance on the spine for the athlete, and the root cause has been evaluated. The third important device in this lab is, which you can see, it's a balance trunk, where we precisely get information about the pelvic and the spine stability and mobility for the athlete. So that's how in the postural lab, we are able to quantify a lot of different components like static stability, dynamic stability, their muscle imbalance, their hip mobility stability specific to their sport. Then comes our this is how the reports have been derived. So you can see the numbers are there to precisely give us an indication that the athlete has improved over the time period. And in both the reports, you can see the values were higher initially and it has gone down. So it means the athlete has progressed. So the basic indication, if we see for the coach and for the athlete, is very easy to understand. You look at the color code. The mark should move towards green. The value should move towards 0. So 0 is the most, efficient level for the athlete for that particular variable. So that's how we can derive the results. Then comes the functional lab. For an athlete, it's very important to quantify how their functional movements are: squats, lunges, their explosivity, their mobility, and also different components related to flexibility and balance. So in our functional lab, we check around 15 different components on this device, which is the digital wall, which is the most advanced device where the athlete doesn't need to undress. There is a camera in front which create different markers for the athlete. So we get information about real-time information about their shoulder joint, their hip joint, their knee joint, and the impact of the activity onto various joints in real time. Then we have in the last picture, if you see the isokinetic device, so we have the picture of the fastest Indian runner in 100-meter runner, and this is from our Odisha facility where the athlete is using the isokinetic device to improve the quadriceps and hamstring ratio, because this is a very important device for the footballers and the hockey players and also athletes involved in track and field to train and also to test, because at times most of the injuries in the knee happens when there is an imbalance in their quadriceps muscles and their hamstring muscles, and Dr. Manit will agree on that. And that is what we are able to precisely quantify and also correct. Then we have the gait and the physiology lab. This is again a very unique lab available in India. So generally you see running forms the basis of all the sport, and the athlete generally runs on the ground or on the treadmill. And when the athlete is running on the treadmill or on the ground, they only get information about how much is their heart rate or how much is the distance they have covered. But running is more than that. We need to understand how much is the step length, how much weight they put on either side, how their center of gravity is, how their exercise economy is. And all those information are not visible through naked eyes. Any expert cannot precisely give you information about how much weight the athlete is putting real time. And on this device, real time in just 30 seconds, we are able to do gait or run analysis for the athlete. Based on the data, based on their sport, we are able to scientifically correct or empower the athlete in their area of improvement. Then we have the physiology lab where we check the VO2 max. We do a VO2 max testing for the athlete. This is a very important test to check the athlete's conditioning, or we generally say, how is athlete's gas or fuel on the field of play, how quickly he gets exhausted, or how is cardiovascular endurances. So precisely in the physiology lab, that is what we precisely test and create a scientific program for the athlete to improve on different variables for the athlete. That's how the reports have been generated. Then we have the treatment and the recovery lab. For the first time, we have a cryo chamber incorporated in two of our facilities, one in Bangalore, where a lot of athletes, there are 7 academies over there, which uses the cryo chamber for recovery extensively. And also in Bhubaneswar, where the athletes and the national teams also use the cryo chamber for recovery. And generally for any form of trauma, we use care therapy, which is again an advanced device. It can be used, it helps fasten the tissue healing. And if someone has an implant as well, it can be safely used. So as I've mentioned that, how do we work? After the assessment, the athlete has been divided into 3 different groups: elite groups, intermediate group, and the beginner group based on their results. The beginner athlete will have results less than 50% of their efficiency, and they need to come 3 times in the facility to train on those components, followed by the intermediate group who needs to come 2 times, less than 75% of their efficiency. And the athlete who is more than 75% is the elite athlete on different variables, and they need to come once in the week. And as I've mentioned, the sports training is also, the corrective measures are also meant on the same devices. And the sports injury and the rehab components have been taken in these labs. And we also have coordination with the coaches, and reassessment is done. So we have a very scientific program in place, which is structured well, where we are able to address a lot of injury or prevent a lot of injury for the athletes in different ecosystems. So for example, in the state of Odisha, we have done a PPP model where the government has provided us the space, and we have a corporate on board to support the program, and we are running the program, and that's where there have been a big impact. In 1 year, we have we have catered close to 1,300 athletes. 700 have been the state hostel athletes, and more apart from that, the other athletes were the national teams who were coming there, different camps which have been organized. And there are different sports, the national teams and the national sports federations also, they do their camps, and the sports franchises also come in. So there are a lot of ISL teams who use the facility in Bhubaneswar. And you see, just to give you an idea, the sports hostel from different district, also now the coaches, they send their athletes to this center. Before, the athletes had no facility in place to look out for their any form of injury or any form of performance related goals. But now the coaches are very much aware, and they send their athletes from different districts to our main center in Bhubaneswar, and they have been catered. And as I've mentioned, the sports franchise is also extensively used, like all the ISL teams, the Mumbai team, and also the Bangalore team, the Odisha team, they use it. And the national, these are certain feedback about the facility, and the under 16 football team, Indian rugby team have used the facility extensively. What was the impact? And this is a very important slide to understand that overall impact of such high performance facility. First of all, there's accountability in the system. There was no accountability in the system before, because everything was more subjective, what the coach used to feel or the physiotherapist used to feel, and the athlete used to suffer because of that. Now, once we have a system in place which is more objective in nature, now we have numbers to quantify and prove. So everyone is under the radar, and everyone has to be accountable. We have the best SOPs in place, where we have used the best global practices into place. We also work on skill development, where the coaches education program, the athlete mental health program have been initiated. And it's economical viable as well. So with the PPP model, where the government has got corporate on board, the athletes have been able to use free of cost the facility, and we are able to have a bigger impact towards the vision to create future champions. So these are a few pictures of our facility. Thank you so much.
Very good, Ranawat. Now, just a small few comments and questions for you all. Comment says that yes, this field is necessary. We are at a very, very nascent stage. I don't think it has anywhere gone near where it should finally be. Like I said, where we require 5 lakh people, we hardly have 30 people coming out. So there is a need. So for that to be taken up, yes, of course, government has to play a role. A lot of education institutions are there. Even to me, many of the governments have approached for seeing how sports should be given its own credit. And I also have been helping them. And I'm sure you all also will help them. But a small query, of course. What happens to indoor games? Would some of this thing be applicable to indoor games, or the games in which there is no major physical this going? Would any one of you have a comment?
So, when we talk about the indoor games, every sport is scientific in nature, and there are different biomechanical components which are very.
Yes, chess would have chess have any sports medicine or something to do with the brain power, and something to do with concentration, and something to do with the.
They need a sports psychologist.
That is one thing where we have again one gold medal. May not be in Olympics, but we have had many people who are champions. Even some few of the upcoming ones are all doing pretty well. And it was invented in India. I'm not specific talking about chess, chess and like chess. Anything to do with sports medicine, or sports medicine is only to do with where there's a huge physical exercise.
So to add to this, you see right now there's a big trend of esports. Esports is gaming, where the athletes prepare like the athletes who have physical components in check. They have to exercise every day. They have to work on their mental ability as well. They have to have good nutrition, to have better hand-eye coordination. They should have better micro and macro nutrients in place to have better balance in when it comes to their internal and external harmony as well. So things are changing, and also for the sport which we feel are not so physical in nature, but it needs more mental exertion. But physical component, mental component, and the technical component, as I've mentioned, goes hand in hand for any and every sport. Dr. Manith, if you have anything to add.
I would like you to comment on how would one go about it? Because, see, India needs something which is good and employable. Here is a field which offers that. And it is reasonably well documented. We always joke that an Indian sports and an Indian movie, whether it is launched or played anywhere in the world, it will be houseful. Of course, Indian sports is somewhere limited to cricket, and we should not believe, cricket as some outside. Cricket is also our own game, nothing to worry. So, along with cricket now, like Manith had showed, so many games have started coming. They are all proving themselves on a good radar. Okay. So that being the case, how do we take care from here to get the number? Maybe how to make the 30 into 3000, two zeros more on the right side, which is something which is the need of the hour. We can't put too many zeros. And how quickly it should be done, and what are efforts which are being done by people like you and people around you, and what is the general reception and reaction, so that we achieve it, because this is a win-win-win situation. Today we have to look for something which is physically good, health-wise good. Yes, this is the one which gives employment. This is the one. This can give awards, reward. This is the one. This can give, make us go into more international fame. This is the one. And this is one which will give inward happiness to people. This is the one. So there's nothing which I see is negative to its growth. Sometimes when something X grows, Y may have to come down. There's nothing much with, and this will generally pay for itself. It is not something where there is a one way traffic of money going in. It will pay for itself, because with more viewership coming in picture, viewership itself has gone into billions. Okay, so which means it pays for itself. So it is a question of joining the right dots, and people like you playing the core catalytic role. You can't build so many by yourself, but you have to play the catalytic role, bring it to the awareness, bring it to the people concerned. So what is it that is being done, and what is it that can be done? Manoj, can you?
So my basic question is ki the government. So the government pays to make doctors, to help patients, to treat patients. And we invest so much in our medical system, in our healthcare. We've got so hundreds of government hospitals, government colleges that are churning out thousands and lakhs of doctors every year. So if we can do that for our patients, why can't we do it for our athletes? Why are we only limited to just five? So why can't we churn out doctors, sports medicine doctors, for the thousands and lakhs of athletes coming into the system every year? And as Dikpal was saying, they're not just elite athletes that we want to look at. We want to look at the school athletes. Almost each school has so many sports that are played in each school. My children go to school, they play games and sports. Almost every parent has children that are playing sports in schools. So that's also an avenue of job creation, is looking after the sports in schools, then the sports in local teams, local colleges, universities, and their sports teams, looking at that as well. And that's basically where we are lagging behind, I feel, at the moment. So if you look at the West, if you look at America, I'll give you an example. So they have team doctors that look after their proper franchise teams like the IPL, ISO. They have team doctors looking after the national teams. They also have team doctors looking after the collegiate teams. They have team doctors looking after the university teams. They have team doctors looking after school teams. And they may not be full-time doctors. Sometimes they're part-time doctors. So there's a big roadmap for growth for sports medicine. It's not just limited to elite athletes and elite teams. It caters to the sports teams in schools, the sports teams in universities, and there are so many opportunities. There's so much we can do for them. There's so much, and the fitness of them will also make India fitter. So, as you were saying with indoor sports, right? So now you've got a chess player. Now, what's the things that go through their mind? They sometimes can get depressed. They're not winning games. They can get fat if they keep eating, and all those things slow them down mentally. So that's where the sports medicine guy needs to step in, look after their psychological aspects, look after their nutrition aspects, make sure that they're conditioned, because the happier and fitter you are, the better will be your outcome in return. And that's what we want to emphasize for indoor sports, for outdoor sports, for sports across the board. And that's where sports medicine plays a role. And as you said, there's only an X here, there's no Y. With the growth of sports medicine, we're only going to be helping athletes get better. We're going to be looking after our young population of 400 million, and we're going to make them fitter and better and injury free going into the future, and get them more involved in sports. They love watching sports. We just got to, and they love playing sports. We just got to prevent injuries and make sure if an injury happens, we can solve it. And that's sports medicine.
Thank you. Uh, Dikpal, anything you would like to comment?
Yes, Dr. Shekhar, if you see right now, next 10 years is the golden time for Indian sports to rise. There have been a lot of changes and implementation when it comes to policies, which have been incorporated by the central and the state governments as well. There is a lot of investment going into infrastructure. But a very important area which needs to be highlighted or worked on is to invest on the manpower, to invest on quality manpower, invest on quality people who can actually help sustain or help support the ecosystem what they are planning to develop. And also there is a big need for technology driven scientific approach in the system, along with different professionals in place. We need to have a strong team of sports medicine doctors, because athlete is a human being first, and as Dr. Manit has rightly mentioned that we have big ideas and ideologies where we want to be the best Olympic nation or be in top 10, but we expect that from the athlete, but in that whole process there are thousands of athletes who are competing and who could not succeed. So we should have a human side of the athlete first, and which should be the heart of the athlete centric approach, which the government needs to incorporate and understand those elements like the psychological component for the athlete, which is very important. For example, during COVID times, the athletes who are preparing for Tokyo 2020, they are going through so much psychological pressure because they're not able to train. They have lost out on 4 5 months of their solid training. And there are other athletes in the West who are able to, they have a strong ecosystem where the ecosystem is able to support them in the best manner to sustain and make sure that their performance don't go down. So this is the difference I'm talking about, and this will go a long way. And keeping that in mind, our founder, Mr. Abhinav Bindra, believes that we can only create a change through education, which can help create future leaders. And keeping that in mind, we have recently launched the most sports science and sports medicine center, which is called ABSMARI in Bhubaneswar, which stands for Abhinav Bindra Sports Medicine and Research Institute. And our goal is to provide world-class global best practices education at an affordable costing. And the admissions are open, so the aspirants who wants to excel in this field of sports science and physiotherapy, they should look out for it.
Thank you. Thank you. So, with that, we conclude today's event. Thank you, both of you.
Thank
And
you.
we
Thank you,
will,
sir.
this is one of the extremely good and catalytic field in which there are, like you said, medical doctors anyway there. In that, some portion of it has to be hived off rather than trying to rediscover the wheel, so that we get the due deserving healthy sportsmen, and make India proud in sports, which we are not today. Except in cricket, I don't think anywhere we are able to do anything which is good in sports. So we should be having a different lead, and it should take, like you said, 10, 20 years it may take to come to its full position, but it can start anytime. And then let me assure you also on the other side that since most of the government, most of the university, they are in touch with me also, they are fully aware, and only they need to get connected to the right set of people like you, and which you all also should do. In whatever way we can help, we will also help you. Akram is also there to help you. Yes, Akram, we can close the.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Shekhar. It's really wonderful having two youngsters of the country, I would say young leaders of the country, who would be leading us in the sports healthcare front. And I think wonderful seeing Dr. Abhinav Bindra coming up with such initiatives and leaders like you, Dr. Manit and Dr. Dikpal, taking these issues forward. I just want to say that in India, we have quite good policies in place. The problem is that we need to implement them on the ground, and we can't expect much from our bureaucrats and politicians. But what we can do, the kind of setup that this public-private partnership that Dr. Avinav Bindra has brought in, and I think you are there. So if we can bridge or create some platforms through public-private partnership and engage local schools. One point I want to say that the sports fraternity belongs to schools. Unless we empower our kids at the school level, India can never win bigger medals in the industrial sports, or we can't build that kind of sports infrastructure. So we have to work on government schools at the remotest to the remotest areas of the country. And we need to reach there. Very good part is that Policy Times has already reached there and has extreme access and popularity among government schools as well as private schools.
I would like to just add one more point
Yeah.
to what you have mentioned, that right now for Indian sport to develop, we should have sporting culture where the parents, rather than going to movies with their kids, they should go for a district level competition and, support their kids and enjoy the participation, thrill of their kids and also the other sports. So once we do that, you will see that, there is
It's a
no
brilliant idea.
sports.
I think with this, in this age of internet culture, we should stop watching movies and we should actually go. And Dr. Avinav Bindra has very rightly encouraged and mentioned this a couple of times in the interview that we did. And he always said that go and watch sports live in different, cities and places where the tournaments are happening. I think it's also right time that we promote that, and that is that way. Not only they will be attracted to the sports, but also the sports fraternity will get a lot of financial and emotional support through this. I think with this, thanking Dr. Manit and Dr. Dikpal and Dr. Shekhar, we would like to end the discussion here. Viewers, if you like discussions like this and really want to see India becoming an advanced, prosperous, healthy nation, keep watching the Policy Times.